Are you guys tired of your locals always coming up to you and asking you to build them their decks for the tournaments that you have to play against them in? I know I'm a little bit sick of it. I don't think that they're learning anything when I just hand them a pile of cards with no insight and just go, hey man, built you a deck. I don't think that makes them a better player, and I definitely don't think it makes them gain any insight into the game. What's going on, guys? My name is Phil Birch from Unfun Stuff, and I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about my personal philosophies about deck building and what exactly it means to be like one of the better minds of the game when playing. Speaking of unfun stuff, use promo code DK Slicer to get yourself 5% off at checkout. That's my promo code. I love Dropkick Slicer, and I think you guys should also fuck up Dropkick Slicer because one checks are tight, which is not going to be in this video. Don't worry about that. Back to the topic at hand. I saw a very cool and interesting discussion on Facebook. Pew, 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 pew. I watched Garrett Brett and Christopher Bromley talk back and forth about why they thought specific cards were good and bad in their respective characters that they were both playing and both played very well to top eights and top fours. They both played very well to top fours, what I should have said, because they both made top four. But anyway, this conversation got me thinking, got the gears turning just a little bit that maybe people don't understand what this argument means. They don't get why they're talking about all these things. They don't understand what a 7 out of 10 deck would mean or an 8.5 for this. And they want a 10 out of 10 deck and you're missing this and that and this and that. And why are you playing Tongue Smack? Why aren't you playing Tongue Smack? What are the benefits? What are the downsides? So I thought it was super important to get people a little bit more informed, especially the newer players of the My Hero Academia card game, from somebody who has been doing this for the better part of 2 decades almost. What are we at, like 15 years? Whenever this game came out, Universes came out, I don't know, forever ago. But yeah, I've been doing this shit forever. I haven't always been a good deck builder. I'm still not a good deck builder, but we're getting better. We're learning. You're always learning, and I think that's the most important thing. Step one: always learn. No, I'm just kidding. But to move into like the actual philosophies that I employ, and I think that are important for you to employ when building decks, right? It's my first and most important thing. The thing that tilts me the most out of no other: early building, early foundation building, and how many you're getting out on turn one, turn two. Personally, if I get like a really small build out on any of the decks that I ever play, I just feel so awful. I just feel like, man, what an unwinnable game. What an irreversible game state that I cannot fix. So, like, there's nothing worse to me than going, all right, I drop my hand and I have a bunch of 2 difficulty foundations on my third mulligan, and I can only pass, like, I go 2 checks, 3 checks, go for a 4 diff, check a 3, and, like, I feel like the game is over from there for me. So what I'm going to try and explain to you is like why a ratio of good spam foundations to your non-spams is important. A lot of symbols have extremely good spam foundations in this game, whether it be a lot of really powerful, impactful 1 diffs or some great 0 diffs, some not so great 0 diffs, right? But at least you have the option to play them. And why that is more important to me than like juicing up all of your counts of the 2 difficulty foundations and 3 difficulty foundations that you find to be so bonkers with their much more powerful and impactful abilities. So realistically, if you're playing a 6 or 7 hand size, 5 hand size is a little gray area. I will not be talking about personally because I don't play 5 hand size characters. I don't know how to play them. I just simply don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know what the build options are. I don't know what the paths I would be trying to find are. So I don't want to discuss and change your opinions on some things that I don't really know much of. I will say that it is possible to employ the things I am telling you into those hand sizes as well. But yeah, like I said, early builds. You want, in my opinion, to be able to build a 4 build as consistently as possible. Will it always happen? No. But when you get the 4 build, you want to be able to execute the 4 build, right? Which is incredibly easy for most decks to do. A lot of decks in the format don't play 2 checks and 1 checks. That's just how it is. A lot of the best decks steer clear of those. Outside of like a specialized sound waves shows up more than any other one, right? Which is also a product of how it plays itself. But every other deck should realistically, through their deck building, be able to play a 3 diff, a 2 diff, a 1 diff, and a 0 diff on their first turn. So you go 3 into a 3 into a 3 into a 3, And that's super easy. That's super easy. If you have a fifth foundation in that situation, right, you ideally want it to be a spam foundation. You want it to be a 1 difficulty or a 0 difficulty foundation. So you have a chance of playing it on a 5 or a 4, which still statistically should be something you are able to make. Now, it's obviously not 100%. It's obviously not even like 75% because you've drawn a bunch of cards, you've checked a bunch of cards. Like the statistics, the ratios, they're all off. But you have a better than 50% chance to make that check as well, which is great. Going first, that's fantastic because you don't lose any tempo even if you do play it. Going second is a little bit more dicey, but at least you have the extra card from your extra card draw at the beginning of the game. That would make me like thrilled beyond belief because it doesn't matter to me what my opponent does early. That doesn't affect how my deck is performing. Like if I play 4 foundations, my opponent hits me with double race, I go builds 4 and then builds 7 on their turn. Them being in deadlock on 1 does not affect me and what my deck was supposed to be doing. It would be frustrating. Yeah, probably a little bit more difficult for me to wrap my head around winning that game, but it's not necessarily insurmountable. Secondly, I think you need to be looking at the ratios you have in your deck, right? Not every deck can survive on playing a million attacks in it and having like a lower foundation count. Those are very specific. Those are very niche decks. So most decks want to be fluctuating around like a 30 to 33% like I'm just going to say bad checks to good checks ratio because I know that it is a very skewed thing where you obviously want to have like a lot of foundations. You want to have probably like 60% foundations. You could do like 60, 30, 10, sure. Why not? Just to make it easy numbers. So in your decks, you want to look at this like 60, 30, 10 number, where 10% is kind of that gray area where it could be more foundations, it could be assets, it could be actions, it could be more attacks, but you ideally want to keep that 10% to the side while looking at the rest of it, where you want to make sure that your checks for your deck are going to skew heavily towards good checks more so than bad checks, but you still want to maintain the ability to, in your, say, 50 card deck, draw your attacks. Draw your some of your like 18 attacks or 16 attacks, whatever. Those numbers aren't always obviously laws either. By the way, I've played 50 card decks with 20 attacks, so that's a 40% attack lineup. And I played 100 actions because it was Tokiyami, so it's like it's like a 40%, 40%, 20% kind of angle, but it is what it is. Um, the ratios being that like the ratios just you just want to make sure you get your solid builds and you get solid attack turns and are able to draw a nice grip of attacks via just an initial draw for a turn and also through your drawing abilities on your cards and or characters, right? You just want to be able to see the cards. That's super important. I actually think this is probably the most important point to me, but I wanted to really I really wanted to iterate enforce. I don't know. I really wanted to drive home um, the importance of building your deck with correct like ratios, with correct builds in mind. But I think it's super, 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 super important. And this is how I tell every single person to build decks. I think it's very important for you to hyper focus on one thing when building a deck. When I build aggro decks, I hyper focus on aggro. I don't put any defensive cards in. I just don't. I simply don't look at them. They don't exist to me. Nothing like that. And the same can be applied to anything, though. You can do that with, say, you want to draw a million cards in your deck. So you say, man, I think it's super cool to draw cards. I want to draw a billion of them. I want to play E to 2. I want to play every single kick that draws cards. I just want to have so many cards in my hand. I want to see what happens. Draw, play them. You want to play a defensive deck. You want to play a Moneta deck that destroys every single foundation in the entire world. Do that. Do it. But make sure you go into it with an open mind that maybe not all these ideas are going to work, right? I think it's super important to focus very heavily into the one thing you want your deck to do because that's why you built it, right? You want to make sure that the thing that you built your deck to do works. You want to be positive that the initial plan for your deck is going to go through. Like that's the big one for me. you're gonna find out that a lot of your grandiose ideas don't work. You're gonna find out that a lot of them are way worse than you think they are. That maybe they're just for casual play. That maybe they don't quite make it into the tournament circuit. Maybe you don't have the next best thing, right? I think it's super important because like you could see it even at the top levels of play. Like I just told you how I built a deck, right? I just told you how I build my aggro decks where it's just like all aggro cards, no defense. I did that with Tokiyami at regionals in Vegas, where it was all offensive cards, no defense, and I just try to go all gas, no breaks, build tall, hope my opponent can't block my tall moves, and see how fast they die. And it worked for most of the rounds, but then it started to not work. It started, the wheels started to come off a little bit when playing against better defenses and more reasonable players towards the end. You see that with Mark Tyner in his fourth kind deck, how it is his initial build was super. It was very bad check oriented. All the bad check cards are good cards, right? Dropkick Slicer is great. Tape Swing is great. Searing Glacial Storm really helps you stay in the game when your opponent is trying to build a million. These are all awesome cards, super powerful cards, and through trial and error, that deck, not just through Mark Tyner, but through people taking his deck, taking his style of play, has evolved into like the fourth kinds we're seeing now, where it is very, very solid. It's fives and threes. It's a lot of consistent draw. It's high engine kicks for a billion. It's just a great poke deck that has the most explosive offense on the turn that it needs to have it. It can tap you out on the turn it needs to tap you out, or it's throwing very good attacks at you for value that you can't necessarily say, is he trying to kill me or not, without just taking 10. And that's like huge, right? I changed Bromley's deck for his Toga a lot, right? I took out cards I thought weren't working through osmosis because I watched him play the deck so much. I didn't have any testing on it, but I watched him. I was watching every single game he played basically when I wasn't playing. Uh, and I could see like in my eyes what was and was not working for him. And I wanted to go, well, I don't think those are going to work for me specifically because I mean, I'm not much different from Bromley in playstyle. Like he blocks better, I attack better. Um, so like I changed things around in that regard. But yeah, the only way to, I guess my point is, and kind of my fourth point in this whole ordeal in this whole matter is that it's the way you are going to learn what works and what does not work for you and your decks, and what you are going to learn about the game and the card pool is all through deck building. It's through deck building and then trial and error. You, if you want to play a 70 card deck just because you like every single card in it, that's something you can do. But I'm going to tell you that like it's not necessarily the best plan to put every single card that you like into a deck and then call it a deck and then hold on to it and go, this is my pile of really cool cards that I like all of. Because I imagine that even liking all of those cards, you are aware that some of those cards are very situational and that you don't tend to use them as often as other cards. So it's important to like just dial it back sometimes because you can't always be using everything. You don't always want to see all of these cards. You want to see specific cards more so than others. So like you have to change your deck size to reflect that. If something is super important to you, you need to have a smaller deck. If everything is generalized and less important, if you're like an Asui, you can play a little bit bigger of a deck because you can have just so many options, all be good and powerful because of your character card. But that's not a lot of the format. A lot of the format has to be more concise. A lot of the format has to play around with their numbers a lot more just so they can see what is and is not working. I'll give you an example again. I have been thoroughly testing Kurigiri for about a bajillion years, and I've changed symbols and I've changed attack lineups countless times because I like the character so much. I think he's so fun. And even this final version that I'm working on, that I'm probably not going to play in anything but fun tournaments, is doing really well, but it's still like an ever changing process where I will play a game against it and I will get a card out that I thought was, maybe we just play a couple of these to see how it works, and I find out it's just super good, and I'm like, oh my god, why weren't we playing more? And that's how you learn, right? You don't just. I think it's better to learn through your experiences than from somebody telling you why this is good, why this is bad. why we need tongue whips in May, why we don't need tongue whips in May, what like all of those things are important. You can get information from guys like me where I will tell you my opinion on things, but it doesn't mean that my opinion is fact, and it doesn't mean that it's something that you should listen to if things are working for you. I hate tongue smack. Everybody's playing tongue smack. It's working for them. They're drawing cards off of it and they're having a great time with it. And like obviously in testing, they are finding it to be a very valuable play to throw a 7 high for 6 at times in their Ochako decks to get a +1 card off of it. I don't like long lasting explosion, but long lasting explosion shows up in some decks and it feels really good for them. They like the card, they're really into it, and I can't say that that's an incorrect maneuver because it does have its bright spots. It does show up in these matches for these players. So like building is decks are all subjective. I guess that's what I'm really getting to. There's no absolute build. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's what feels right for you and what you are going to use to get to the next level. What deck you are building to get yourself above your opponents, above the competition in your locals, in a regional, in a provisional, at nationals, worlds, wherever. Testing is super, super, super important. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, that sounds more like, hey, this is how you get play experience, but really I think it's a very key part of deck building. I think like it is important for you to be able to know what works and what doesn't through the cards you're playing and who you are playing against. But yeah, that is my video, guys. Be sure to hit the like, subscribe, share this with your friends, share this with people you are trying to convince to become better at the game just through their actions, right? I don't think there's a right and a wrong to most stuff in the My Hero Academia card game, but I think it is right for everybody to be able to build a deck that they are proud of through their own actions. But yeah, guys, that's it from me. I hope you enjoy the video. And yeah, leave your comments if you think I'm just a stupid idiot that doesn't know anything they know about deck building. All right, guys, we'll talk to you all later. Peace.